Guys, girls, babes, welcome back to the Jenaya Talks Caps podcast. I would like to extend my heartfelt thank you to all of you for taking time out of your day to tune in today. It has been a hot minute, folks, since we have been on air here, obviously, at the Jenaya Talks Caps podcast. As due to some changes with our hosting platform, we had to decide how we ultimately wanted to proceed in bringing this content to you. And so as you can see here, we have settled on producing a video-friendly version of the podcast, which we will then upload after the fact as well on all audio podcast platforms. So those being Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., etc., etc. So going forward, you can find the show not only on those audio platforms, but also with the video version on our YouTube channel, Jenaya Talks Caps. So please, folks, don't forget to subscribe, whether it is to the YouTube channel or on one of those audio platforms, or I would even suggest subscribing to all of the above, because the point is that we would love to have you along here with us for this ride, following along and analyzing the trials and triumphs of our beloved Washington Capitals, as well as the rest of the NHL to a lesser extent, as well. So thank you all again, folks, for being here. And hey, let's dive right into this thing here today, because we have got a whole lot to talk about with the NHL trade deadline having come and gone now. And there were many, frankly, shocking moves that were made by teams around the National Hockey League, and a shocking level of incompetence shown by a few organizations, if we are being honest. And so we will get into all of that, as well as how it affects, of course, or at least how it could affect potentially our own Washington Capitals, because we know that's all that we all really care about the most anyway, right? Is our own team. So we will look at all of that. Let's get started here. And first up, right? Our own Washington Capitals. Like I said, they did make one, I would call it a small-ish move, acquiring forward Anthony Beauvillier from the rival Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for a second-round draft pick in 2025. And a few notes on that draft pick for the Caps. First of all, I don't mind trading a second in this year's draft at all. As it has become widely known at this point that this year's draft class is a substantially weaker one than it has been in recent years past. And secondly, it's important to note that the second round pick that the Caps are sending to Pittsburgh is their own second rounder. The Caps' second own, that is. And so why that is important is because obviously the Caps right now are vying for this season's President's Trophy. It is basically them and the Winnipeg Jets at this point, vying for that honor. And it's basically them and the Winnipeg Jets that have been in first place all season long as well. And so with that being the case, with the Caps being a very strong team and basically being a lock at this point to finish top 2 in the league standings, that means that second round pick is in all likelihood going to be a very late second rounder. Probably closer to a third rounder, actually, an actual value of the player that you're going to be getting at that spot. So that is the pick, the Caps' own second round pick that they send to Pittsburgh for Beauvillier. And the Caps as well, they did already own an extra second round pick for this year's draft. Let's not forget that as well, right? They had accumulated that, of course, as part of the trade that sent Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway to Boston back in 2023. So the Caps, if you don't recall that deal, they got a first, a second, and a third from the Bruins in that deal. And I can do a bit of a quick trade tree here for you on that deal if you'd like, as I am very well informed on it, as I do like to chirp my Uncle Brad about it all the time. He is a big Boston Bruins fan. And so the Caps, essentially what we ended up getting out of that deal, after all is said and done, is we ended up with a top pairing defenseman on the best team in the Eastern Conference right now in Rasmus Sandin. Best team in the league right now, actually. We passed Winnipeg the other night. So Rasmus Sandin, who is still only 25 years old, by the way. He just turned 25 the other day. Literally just the other day. It was his birthday, March 7th. That was the trade deadline day as well. So a happy 25th birthday on trade deadline day to Rasmus Sandin. But yeah, we end up with a young top pairing defenseman out of the deal who has already extended with the Caps, and so he is now signed long-term at a very affordable and team-friendly cap hit too, by the way. And so, you know, we get him, and we also, out of that deal with the Bruins, I like to tell my uncle that, you know, we vicariously ended up with Logan Thompson out of that deal as well, who of course is now the number one goaltender on the best team in the Eastern Conference, best team in the league, like I said, and who as well has already extended with the Washington Capitals also at a very affordable and team-friendly cap hit, and so he too will be here long-term. And the reason that I like to say that we vicariously ended up with Logan Thompson out of that deal is because A, it's just a great way to troll my uncle, right? And B, because it is basically true if you really break it down and think about it, as although we did not directly trade that specific third-round draft pick that we got from the Bruins, getting that extra third from them in that year, 2024, it did allow us to feel comfortable trading away one of the other 2024 thirds that we had, and that is ultimately what got the deal done with Vegas for Logan Thompson. But you know what? If you want to be a stickler and look at it literally, then we can do that too. The Caps, with the specific third-round draft pick that they got from Boston in that deal, they drafted forward Eric Smateko, who as well looks like he is turning into a hell of a prospect for the Washington Capitals. So no matter which way you look at that one, it is great for the Caps. And then we have so far kept the second-round pick that the Bruins gave us in that deal, which is the Bruins' own second-rounder in this year's draft, 2025. So yeah, I mean, to sum up, like, we trade the first from the Bruins for Rasmus Sandin, right? We still have their second-round pick, and then we either got Logan Thompson or Eric Smateko from their third-round pick, however you want to look at it. I choose to look at it as Logan Thompson because I think it's a bigger troll towards my uncle. But you know what? The Bruins, for their part, what did they get, right? They got a few months of Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway, and they got a historically embarrassing upset at the hands of the Florida Panthers in round one. I wonder who won that trade. Anyways, the point is that with the Bruins sucking now, really, you know, their demise comes at a perfect time for the Caps, as with them being lower down in the standings this season, that second rounder that they traded to us will now be a high one. It will likely almost be like in first round pick territory. And so obviously that benefits us big time. And so that is why, you know, all of this is a long-winded way of saying that is why I am perfectly fine giving up what the Caps gave up to get Anthony Beauvillier. And speaking of what the Caps are getting in Beauvillier and what he should bring to this team, I like the player. You know, like, I think it's a nice depth add for the bottom six and someone who can potentially move up to play in the top six if there are injuries. I think he brings speed. I think he brings competitiveness. I think he's tenacious on the forecheck, and he can chip in an important goal or two along the way as well. And yeah, just a nice add. And I like that they didn't rock the boat too much with this magical chemistry that the team has going on the ice and in the locker room, you know, by doing too much or by making a bigger lineup shaking move, right? This team is good enough to be in first place in the entire NHL right now. They are therefore good enough, in my opinion, to win the whole thing as is, if they are going to play up to their capabilities of how we know that they can play. So the last thing that we wanted, at least the last thing that I wanted, was a repeat of 2010, right? Where they changed too much of what was already a President's Trophy winning roster at the deadline. And then they ended up messing up all of the team's chemistry on the ice. So, you know, I'm good with what the Caps have done here. You know, add on the fringes, add around the edges of your lineup, essentially. And, you know, just let the guys who have been doing it for you all year continue to do it down the stretch and into the playoffs. And yeah, I mean, speaking of playoffs... Speaking of playoffs, folks, playoffs? You're talking about playoffs? Yes, we are, because it is March, and the playoff picture certainly got more than a little bit of a shakeup at the trade deadline. So let's go over some of these moves here. Let's take a look at some of these teams within the division, within the conference, and how some of these moves might affect things in the division and in the conference moving forward with an eye toward the playoffs. Boy, where to even start here? If you were paying attention to this trade deadline, then you already know some shit went down, right? Some shit really went down here. And I think you have to start let's start in our own division. And it's fitting here because I think that you have to start with the Carolina Hurricanes and with what they did here, because what they've done here really has got everybody wondering what the hell it is that they're doing, frankly. Or what it is that they're trying to accomplish here, because it was a very weird series of moves, just a weird series of events for them, leading up to this year's trade deadline and now at the trade deadline as well. And I do think it's fair to wonder if they do know what the hell they're doing here, because first of all, we all saw, like, leading up to the trade deadline, right? They make a big splash. And they trade who was essentially their best player, frankly, this season, Marty Necas. He was their leading scorer. He's one of the leading scorers in the entire National Hockey League this season. They have him under team control for this season and next. So he was not a UFA yet or anything like that. But they trade him for pending unrestricted free agent Mikko Rantanen, right? From the Colorado Avalanche. So surface level, and it wasn't just Marty Necas, by the way. It was there were some other assets involved as well. Jack Drury, a few draft picks, I believe, as well, going back to Colorado. So, I mean, on the surface level, it's like it looks good initially for the Carolina Hurricanes in that Rantanen is a great player. He's a great playoff performer as well. He's, I believe, 4th in the entire National Hockey League in scoring, like, total over the last several seasons now. And he's a hell of a playoff performer. He puts up points like crazy in the playoffs at an even higher rate than he does in the regular season. So surface level, you look at it and you're like, wow, the Hurricanes are getting Mikko Rantanen. But I mean, he's a UFA at the end of the season, right? So you're thinking in the back of your mind there, like, okay, so they must know that he wants to resign with them, right? They must know that in order to trade all of these assets for him. They must have some idea, some inkling that he is willing to extend with them on a long-term contract. You would think so. Well, you would be wrong, because he did not want to resign there at all. And apparently, according to Rod Brindamore anyway today, Rod Brindamore came out and said that Mikko Rantanen, from the very beginning, he was not willing to resign there. Rod Brindamore said that Mikko Rantanen came to them in that trade, and he essentially said, you know what, there's 4 teams in this league that I'm willing to sign with, and you guys are not one of them. So that's like as soon as he gets there. So I don't know how you make that trade if you're the Carolina Hurricanes to bring him there and give up Marty Necas and give up all of those assets to get Mikko Rantanen if you were not sure that you were going to be able to re-sign him, if you hadn't even checked in with the guy to even see, like, is this even a possibility? Are you even open to it? So they didn't do any homework there. They just bring the guy in. They haven't asked him, like, if he has any interest in staying whatsoever. He gets there. Marty Necas is out the door. He's gone. Jack Drury, out the door, gone. Some other assets, out the door, gone. Rantanen comes in. He's like, no, I hate it here. I'm not re-signing here. And so the Carolina Hurricanes then are faced with, okay, so do we keep this guy as an own rental for a potential playoff run here? Or do we flip him again? And so they end up obviously flipping him again. I mean, it's really crazy what's going on here. So they flip him to the Dallas Stars. Just pulling up the trade here, just to get it exactly right here. So they flip him to the Dallas Stars. And the Carolina Hurricanes, they get back forward Logan Stankoven, a nice young player, don't get me wrong, he's a very good young player, but he's not Mikko Rantanen, and he's not even Marty Necas, he's not even close at this point. So they get back forward Logan Stankoven, the Carolina Hurricanes do, a conditional first-round pick in the 2026 draft, a conditional first-round pick in the 2028 draft, a third-round pick in 2026, and a third-round pick in 2027. So basically, they get back a bunch of draft picks that aren't going to help them this season, and they get back Logan Stankoven. So I mean, what can you say? Like, it's just, if this was a team that was like looking to not have a run this season, then you'd be like, okay, you got a couple of firsts back, that's good. But the Carolina Hurricanes were picked by many to be a Stanley Cup contender this season, and they definitely have gotten weaker, much weaker, over these last few weeks. Like, make no mistake about it. I don't think anyone can argue that. And the weirdest thing, obviously, is that they largely did it to themselves. Like, whether you want to call it arrogance in, thinking, assuming that Mikko Rantanen would just want to stay there long term without ever having even asked the guy about it, or whether you want to call it just sheer stupidity on the part of their management group, whatever it is, it's not good, folks. And yeah, I mean, like, they have weakened themselves ahead of the Stanley Cup playoffs. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So just some really, really baffling work by them over there in Carolina. There was some talk that, maybe they would try to flip a pick or two that they got back in the Rantanen deal from Dallas. Maybe they would try to take one or two of those picks and flip them for a player that could help them now, but they never got that done. And then they come out after the fact, after the trade deadline, and their management group's excuse is basically, well, you know what? The Rantanen deal took so long to complete, sending him to Dallas, that we really didn't have time to work on anything else. Huh? What do you mean? Like, you're supposed to be a Stanley Cup contender this season, and you're just shipping out countless goals, countless points out of your lineup and getting back Logan Stankoven. Again, nothing against Logan Stankoven, great young player, but he is not yet at the level, if he will ever be at the level of a certainly Mikko Rantanen or a Marty Necas. So just really baffling work by them over there in Carolina. Like I said, did not like their deadline at all. Loved it for us. Love it for the Caps being in their division. Certainly. New Jersey Devils in third place in the Metropolitan currently, barely hanging on to it by a thread. Columbus Blue Jackets are coming up right behind them. But yeah, New Jersey, obviously, like, they're going to be weaker now as well with the season-ending injury to Jack Hughes. Jack Hughes, Mr. People pay to watch me play. Well, not anymore. They don't. Not this season anyway. He is done for the year, so obviously they are going to be weaker now this season for that, and they don't do much at the trade deadline either. Columbus Blue Jackets, like I said, a great, great story, obviously, with the whole doing it for the Goudreau's mentality. But still, I think big picture, they probably are still very beatable if you're meeting them in a playoff series this season. So when you look at the Metropolitan Division, it's very interesting for the Washington Capitals. Like, it looks to be, you don't want to look past anyone, obviously, but it looks like the Caps could have a path here potentially, if they're able to stay healthy themselves, if they're able to play well. You get a wild card team in the first round most likely, and then you most likely get one of Carolina or New Jersey or potentially Columbus, whoever takes that third spot in the Metro at the end of the day. You get one of those teams in the second round. It's shaping up quite nicely, if I'm being honest, for the Caps. Again, you don't want to look ahead too much. You don't want to look past anyone. I'm just saying the potential is there for Washington to make a run this season. And then when you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, obviously the big one, like, let's just get the elephant out of the room here. Obviously the big one is the fire sale in Boston, and Brad Marchand, their captain, their long time fan favorite. He is traded to the Florida freaking Panthers of all teams. Just unbelievable. They ship him to a division rival, first of all. And second of all, the stuff with the contract between him and the team, it's just weird. It's just bizarre. Like, now that it's coming out what the Boston Bruins, Don Sweeney and the Boston Bruins actually offered him, they basically gave him the Steven Stamkos treatment in Tampa Bay. Like, they basically gave him a contract offer that was so insulting that he would never sign it. Basically just saying, essentially they're saying with that low ball offer that we don't really want to keep you, right? And so Marchand, of course, he's not able to sign that one. He doesn't want to leave that much money on the table. Quite frankly, it was kind of an insulting offer from the Boston Bruins to Brad Marchand. And so he can't sign that offer. He decides not to. And they decide to trade him, like I said, to a division rival in the Florida Panthers. And if there has ever been a player that fits the DNA of that Florida Panthers team as much as Brad Marchand, like that is a perfect trade for them. Perfect trade for them. And they got Seth Jones as well. They picked up Seth Jones from the Chicago Blackhawks, making a deal happen there with some salary retention. So, they beef up their back end there as well. The Tampa Bay Lightning, they bring back Yanni Gourde, and they add Oliver Bjorkstrand in the same deal as well. So those are a couple of nice adds for them. The Toronto Maple Leafs, they trade a first-round pick for Scott Laughton. That seems insane to me. That seems insane. I like Scott Laughton as a player. Like we've seen him for a number of years now with the Philadelphia Flyers. Nice player. He's a fine player. He's not worth a first-round pick. So that seems crazy to me. And then they also traded another first-round pick as well as one of their only decent prospects in Fraser Minton to Boston. I think they might regret that one down the road in the future. To Boston for Brandon Carlo. So the Leafs now, they will not have a first-round pick until 2028. So you better win a cup here at some point. And the Ottawa Senators as well over in the Atlantic Division, currently occupying a wild card spot, are the Ottawa Senators. They make quite a big trade, trading one of their, I think you would consider him part of their young core there, Josh Norris. They trade Norris for Dylan Cousins out of Buffalo. So that was quite a shakeup there for both of those organizations. And yeah, I mean, we'll see how it all shakes out with the standings and whatnot in the Eastern Conference, who's playing who and all that. But yeah, certainly some teams got quite a bit stronger. Florida and Tampa Bay, certainly, I think. Certainly some teams got quite a bit weaker too. Carolina, the Carolina Hurricanes, and then the New Jersey Devils, although not really through any fault of their own. Jack Hughes gets injured, season-ending injury, like I said. And yeah, Mikko Rantanen is a Dallas Star, so that was a big one. Huge pickup for the Dallas Stars. The guy, like I said, is an unbelievable playoff performer, and he does sign an extension in Dallas in order to make that deal happen. So he is going to be there long term. I love what the Colorado Avalanche did as well. They add Brock Nelson from the New York Islanders and Charlie Coyle from the Boston Bruins as well, down the middle of their ice behind Nathan MacKinnon. So like a 1-2-3 down the middle of Nathan MacKinnon, Brock Nelson, and Charlie Coyle, that is insane. So some very nice pickups by then. And that's after they had already added guys like Marty Necas, like I said, and goaltender Mackenzie Blackwood as well. They added for this season as well. So they're looking very formidable over there in the Central Division. The Winnipeg Jets as well. They made a couple of minor moves. Obviously, they are currently in first place in that division and in the Western Conference. So they similar to the Caps, right? They just make a couple of minor moves. And I do like both of their moves for them. They bring in forward Brandon Tanev, certified pain in the ass type of guy, and they bring in defenseman Luke Schenn as well. So a nice sturdy defensive defenseman there. Brings a lot of toughness, brings a lot of grit. So that adds a ton of grit to their lineup, both on the back end in Luke Schenn and up front in Brandon Tanev. So I like those moves for them. I'm utterly confused, you guys. I really am, by the Edmonton Oilers. Like, how do you justify not adding a reliable goaltender if you're the Edmonton Oilers? I don't get that. I cannot understand that at all. Their big ad was defenseman Jake Wallman from San Jose. Jake Wallman, who is an offense-first, not reliable defensemen, which just seems like adding more of what they already have, right? They're not addressing their actual needs. So I didn't get Edmonton's deadline at all. I thought it was a big miss on their part not to pick up a goaltender who they can trust. Vegas was relatively quiet, although they did bring back forward Riley Smith, who obviously is very familiar to them, won the Stanley Cup with them. So that's probably a nice add for them. But yeah, I mean, in the Western Conference, it's kind of a couple of teams really going like all in Dallas and in Colorado, really improving their teams a lot. And then it's a few teams not really doing much. If you're the Winnipeg Jets, like I said, I think it's easier to justify that because the Winnipeg Jets are kind of in the same situation as the Caps. They're in first place. They've been playing very well all season long. They don't really want to mess with the chemistry that their team already has. But then, you know, teams like Vegas and certainly Edmonton, like, just kind of missing the boat, honestly, at the trade deadline, not really getting, certainly Edmonton, like I said, not really getting what they actually really needed. So we'll see how it all shakes out. It has been very interesting, I will tell you that much. We'll see. We will see. We'll keep an eye on the standings to see who's playing who. Like I said, we will be back next week with another episode. We are going to make this a regular thing. Here doing the video version of the podcast, which, like I said, will be put up on YouTube. The audio version will still be available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on all of those audio platforms. So you can choose, you can decide, you can get it just on audio, or you can watch along the video version on YouTube. And that is going to be it for today, babes. I would like to thank you all so much for listening, as always. And if you haven't done so already, please do go ahead and click on that subscribe button if you do enjoy the show here. I would love to have you along here with us for this ride, the rest of the regular season, and then hopefully, obviously, deep into the Stanley Cup playoffs as well. It has been a pleasure, babes. Until next time, this is Jenaya Talks Caps signing off. And as always, let's go Caps, baby.